Greetings! What is up, everyone? It is I, the man, the myth, the mustache, Tim here, and I got a brand new video for you. Welcome to part 18, as well as the grand finale of What If Toga Was in Class 1A. Please, sit back and relax, because you are in for a treat. Now, let's begin the story, shall we? Overhaul's eye twitched as his remaining men armed themselves with several guns and bullets. He looked to Twice with narrowed eyes, who tensed up, but created 2 Overhaul clones, as per instructed. "Sir, we still don't know if these bullets will work correctly yet," one of his followers said as they loaded up their pistol. "Well, we'll have to use this as a practice round now, won't we?" Overhaul said calmly. He looked to one of his clones, then to the cowering little girl in the corner. "We're under attack. Mimic is keeping them in the tunnels for now. You know what to do," he explained. "Eri, come," the clone ordered as he began to walk off. The little girl was terrified, looking at the 3 different Overhauls, but left with the clone nonetheless. Overhaul sighed as he pulled his gloves on tighter, and his men got into a holding position. His other clone joined him at his side, as the 2 waited for the heroes to arrive. Twice frowned before he slipped away from the scene. "The elimination round has concluded!" The administrator of the Provisional license test announced back at the building the students were in. Many had been eliminated, though all of UA and many students from Shiketsu High were still in. The students sat around in rest, waiting for the next test to finish preparing. Soon it was ready to go. The students were directed out into a destroyed cityscape. They all looked in awe as the test was explained. The students quickly rushed out, as Toga lingered behind for a moment. Uraraka and Midoriya both looked back at her nervous expression. "Don't worry, it's all fake, Himiko. You got this," Uraraka called over. Toga looked from the wreckage to her 2 friends, who smiled supportively to her. Toga took a deep breath before she smiled. With a nod, she ran off with them. Soon, Gang Orca came onto the scene. "Let's see what you heroes can do while facing a villain," he said firmly. Before the students could react, several dark portals formed all around the testing area. Everyone stood in shock as Shigaraki, Dabi, Kurogiri, and several of Overhaul's crew emerged from the portals. "Please say this is a part of the test," Kaminari said hopefully. Suddenly, a small cluster of Nomu raced out of the other portals. "Evacuate!" Orca shouted, as he and several teachers raced towards the villains. "Now!" "Destroy them, and bring me All Might," Shigaraki demanded, as the villains all raced out towards the heroes. Toga stood in shock for a moment, before she looked at her other classmates. Her eyes shot to Ida. She didn't have practice with a speed quirk, but they needed to get these people out quickly. There were still actors all over the testing grounds. "Ida!" she called over to the boy. It took a moment before he realized what she was shouting to him about. But when he did, he raced over to let her take his blood. "We need to get the civilians out," Ida declared as Toga shifted into him. "We cannot allow our fear to take control of us." Their classmates and the other students all nodded in agreement before they all rushed to start helping the actors. Meanwhile, back at Overhaul's hideout, the heroes ran down the hall after finishing off Mimic. They skidded to a stop, just in time to see the array of guns aimed at them, along with the 2 Overhauls. Kamui Woods quickly formed a wooden wall to block the gunfire. He then parted the wood just enough for Best Jeanist to send out his threads. The threads bound several of the armed minions to lessen their firing, just enough for Gran Torino to maneuver his way towards the villains. After the wood wall was lowered, Overhaul then reached over and touched the threads of one of the minions, before all the threads shredded apart, then reformed back into the direction of Best Jeanist. Fat Gum rushed over just in time to take the attack. He winced in pain as Gran Torino began to take out the minions. He skidded to a stop on the ground as the pros lowered the wall. "Surrender now, and—" Gran Torino began, but was cut short by a gunshot, and a sudden bullet piercing his side. Gran Torino furrowed his brows as he looked to see a man in a mask and white cloak with a gun aimed at him. He moved to shoot towards the man, only to manage a small jump, which made him fall to the ground. The pro hero stared on in shock, as well as Gran Torino, who clutched at his injury. It works after all. Well, that's good news, Overhaul said calmly, as a large man walked over from a side room with metal bracers on his forearms and stood between the Overhauls and the heroes. Now, what were you all saying about surrendering? Back at the testing grounds, the students raced to help the actors out of the area as the teachers took down a few of the villains. Toga shifted back from Ida as she and the others watched the battle, as well as the Nomu that were beginning to grow closer as they finished off some of the teachers. She panted as she stood up fully. Ida placed a hand on her shoulder as she went to step forward towards the battle. Toga, I understand, but we mustn't interfere. This is not a fight we can help, Ida said softly. Toga closed her eyes for a moment before leaving with him and the others to head towards All Might, who was directing people out. Just as they made their way towards him, a Nomu crashed through the wall and grabbed All Might. No! Midoriya shouted as the Nomu flew back towards Shigaraki. Midoriya, don't! Ida started, just as Midoriya shot out from the hole after the beast. The Nomu dropped All Might in front of Shigaraki, who grinned wider and wider before he began to reach down towards All Might. Before he could touch him, Shigaraki heard a scream from Midoriya right before an odd black-like beam wrapped around his wrist and flung him away. Midoriya's eyes grew wide from the sudden black whip-like thing that came from his hand, just before several more shot out and began to wreak havoc on everything and everyone. Toga then ran towards the hole, as did Bakugo. This is our fight now too, Toga shouted as she leapt out through the hole. Bakugo grabbed her hand as he fired off explosions with the other. Move it or die, losers! Bakugo shouted back. A man would fight for his fellow hero, Kirishima declared as he and Tetsu raced off. Sorry, Ida, I can't just leave them behind, Uraraka said, as Todoroki offered a hand to her. Then let's save a friend, he said calmly. Uraraka gripped his hand and the two left, using Todoroki's flames to fly through the sky. Ida tensed up before he looked on with determination. A moment later, he and several others raced out back onto the testing grounds. The students landed near Midoriya and began to help get the injured teachers out of the way. Miss Joke looked up at Midoriya, losing control, and forced herself to stand on her own. Be ready to catch him, the green-haired woman instructed, as she looked at one of Kami's fellow students. Inasa, right? The boy bowed to her quickly. Cool. Can you get me up there? When the boy agreed, she braced herself as she was flown up with powerful winds. Hey! Midoriya's strained eyes slowly looked at the woman. He knew her. Miss Joke was a pretty skilled hero. Why can't a nose be 12 inches long? She then pointed to the boy with a bright smile. Because then it would be a foot! The students looked on with blank expressions as Miss Joke finished her punchline and began to glow. Midoriya then started to laugh uncontrollably. The distraction caused his quirk to act up and retract. He then began to fall quickly. He was caught by some winds made by Inasa. The boy slowly stopped laughing as Miss Joke was set down. The group couldn't celebrate just yet, as three Nomu that were barely conscious got up to their feet, as Shigaraki slowly got up as well. I will not lose like this, not to some dumb students, and not to a woman with horrible jokes, he screamed. And here I thought that joke measured up well, Miss Joke said with a shrug. Back with the pro heroes, Fat Gum did his best to try to work through the barrier that was in place over the behemoth of a man in front of him. Meanwhile, Aizawa did his best to look back and forth between the two overhauls that he and Vlad King attempted to fight the best they could by blocking their quirks, while the other heroes did their best to work around the battle to take out the extra minions and to try to stop the one who had the gun. Just as they began to get the upper hand, Aizawa felt his movements slip up and his vision go blurry as he began to stumble. This caused him to break eye contact long enough for Overhaul to destroy the ground to make him, his clone, and the two pros fall. Aizawa and Vlad got trapped under the debris. Aizawa managed to look up just in time to block one of the Overhaul's quirk as they touched Vlad, though he felt a looming presence nearing him as well. Vlad King's eyes grew wide as he looked over towards his fellow teacher. "Aizawa!" he shouted out, though couldn't get Aizawa to look towards his own attacker to protect himself. "If I look away, you die, Vlad. The kids need you," he said firmly. Before the hand touched him, the overhaul over him turned into goo. Overhaul and Vlad King looked over in surprise to see Spinner as he landed after having swung his sword through the clone, which managed to destroy it. Spinner then twirled his sword and pointed it at Overhaul. "No one will suffer at your hands any longer, Overhaul, especially not that little girl, thanks to those pros outside. I suppose it's lucky that one was a clone as well, since Twice's clones break down when you give enough damage to them," he said flatly, as the heroes above started to finish off their targets, and began to help each other finish off the remaining minions. "Last chance. As much as I would like to end you myself, I believe these pros would prefer to take you in rather than you be dead." The other heroes then dropped down from the floor above, surrounding the villain. "Do you surrender?" he asked calmly. Overhaul tensed up in rage, though with Aizawa staring at him, he couldn't retaliate. Instead, he finally surrendered. The pros moved in and arrested Overhaul. They helped Aizawa and Vlad King out from the debris. On their way out, the pro heroes stood in shock as the news hit them of the attack going on the testing grounds. The pros that were still in fighting condition raced off to go help out. Back at said situation, the students barely avoided the attacks of the Nomu, while they did their best to keep the injured and knocked out teachers out of harm's way. Thankfully, Miss Joke was able to keep Shigaraki at bay with her quirk, although his laughing was something the kids would have nightmares about for years. They kept holding out as long as they could, though they were all running low on steam. If the students hadn't been helping each other avoid the attacks, there would have been plenty of them injured. Toga kept moving, though she looked over to Uraraka, who tried to keep Midoriya out of harm's way as he began to wake up. They needed to do something. Toga then had an idea. She raced her way over towards Uraraka. She looked to her with gentle eyes, which were returned with a soft smile. Uraraka held out her arm so Toga could draw her blood. Once she did, Toga looked around all the injured people with a mildly growing blush. She focused herself as she managed to find the guy she was looking for. "Bakugo!" The blonde bombshell looked over in annoyance, just in time to see Toga turn into Uraraka with a grin. "How far can you throw a ball?" The boy looked confused just before he saw her touch a Nomu that was close to her, and it began to float. Bakugo then grinned wildly and sped over. He then blasted the Nomu up high into the air, as the two heroes in training made their way over to the other two Nomu to get them up into the air as well, with Toga touching them and Bakugo blasting them. Toga heaved a bit as she looked up to the creatures. Todoroki then walked over and raised his ice arm. He gave a nod to Toga, who smirked and pressed her fingertips together. The Nomu then began to fall. When they got close enough, Ice shot forward and caught the beings in mid-air, trapping them all high in the air. Soon after, the pro heroes arrived just as Toga shifted back to her normal form while holding her stomach, with Uraraka rubbing her back. Midoriya sat with All Might, and the others did their best to tend to the teachers and injured students. Vlad King raced over to Toga, who looked up in shock at Vlad's injured state. The two embraced, as Gang Orca explained what happened to the pros who had just arrived. After handling Shigaraki, Gang Orca and the pro heroes gathered the students around. "Today, you all proved yourselves as heroes in training, so you all have passed the test and will be receiving provisional licenses," Orca explained. The students excitedly cheered, though Toga slowly looked to Vlad. "What is it, dear?" he asked curiously. "Where's Dabi? And Kurogiri?" she asked, realizing that she didn't remember seeing them being arrested with the other villains. Vlad King's eyes grew wide as he moved with the pro heroes to try to search the place for them. There were no clues to be found until later that night, when Shigaraki disappeared from his prison cell, and the binds that kept him locked up burned away. It was enough to keep the pro heroes on high alert, except for Vlad King and Aizawa, who stayed with the children, beginning to prepare for the media circus that would likely come. Toga's mother was nowhere near thrilled when she heard about what happened, though she did her best to try to tell her daughter that she was proud of her. Despite the attack, she wouldn't feel so discouraged. After the phone call, Toga sat outside the dorms where she was soon joined by Vlad King. She rested on his shoulder as he gently held her in a supportive manner.
You did well today,
Vlad said softly. Yeah, but the villains got away because we missed 2 of them, Toga said with a sigh.
Dear, that may be true, but today we still arrested an entire criminal organization that could have hurt as many people as they could, not to mention abusing a little girl. An organization we wouldn't have known existed if it wasn't for your help.
He consoled her with a soft smile.
Sadly, there will always be a villain to capture, but today is still a victory, because we still came out over the villains, and those who wish to do evil to others. That, and you proved what I knew you could do all along.
Toga slowly looked up to him with a confused look as he smiled down to her.
That despite your situation, you can be a hero. You can work around the things that hinder you to be a hero and what you want to be. You were put into a worst-case scenario, and you not only made it through that without breaking, but you helped stop any further assault to others. And when others ask the question, can those with troubled pasts and villainous quirks be heroes? We can now prove to them all that with enough determination and willpower, that yes, they can. That they can be anything they want to be so long as they work hard enough and never give up.
He gently kissed the top of her head as she looked up to him with a soft smile and teary eyes.
I am so proud of you, Himiko. I know that no matter what the world will throw at us, so long as we never give up, we can all defeat the forces that try to stop us.
You know you're really cheesy, Toga said with a giggle, and wiped her tears away as she and Vlad King laughed. With enough willpower, determination, and by fighting as hard as you can, anyone can be whoever they dream. Though sometimes dreaming is not enough. The road may not be as smooth as one dreams, nor as clean-cut, but those who push through the pain and the tears that may come their way will find themselves where they had once dreamed they'd be. It may be later than planned. It may be a bit different than they had planned, but they will find their dreams. It is people who can fight through it all and change the world, and leave it brighter than what it was when they arrived. It is these people who finish their fight that go back and help fight back the darkness, for those who are still fighting on their own, who show the next generation the path to the light. These people are what we call true heroes. And that has been our video, as well as the finale of What If Toga Was in Class 1A. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you have enjoyed this series. Before I go, there's a few things I want to let you know. First off, We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible content our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's it for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and I do hope you all have an amazing day. Take it easy, everyone. Mustache out.